On July 16, 1969, the most watched machine in human history lifted off the coast of Florida and carried 3 men toward the moon. 1 million people watched from the beaches. 600 million more watched on television. It is remembered as one of the purest moments of triumph the human race has ever produced. But behind that perfect image, 2 secrets were hidden. One was about where the rocket came from. The other was a speech, already written, for a funeral that had not happened yet. And when you know both of them, the brightest achievement of the 20th century starts to look very different. Let's start with the rocket. To leave Earth, Apollo 11 needed the most powerful machine ever built, the Saturn V. 360 feet tall, generating over 7 million pounds of thrust, shaking the ground for miles. It was a miracle of engineering. And the man most responsible for it was a rocket scientist named Wernher von Braun. Americans loved him. He was on television, in magazines, the charming genius promising the stars. But von Braun had another life, one that the cameras never mentioned. Because a little over 2 decades earlier, he had built rockets for Nazi Germany. Von Braun was the technical director behind the V-2, the world's first long-range ballistic missile, a weapon Hitler rained down on London and Antwerp. And the V-2 was not built in a clean laboratory. It was assembled underground at a place called Mittelbau Dora by prisoners from concentration camps, worked as slave labor in tunnels carved into a mountain. The conditions there are almost unspeakable. Starvation, disease, executions. By the end, an estimated 20,000 prisoners had died building these rockets, which means something that is hard to even say out loud. More people died building the V-2 than were ever killed by it as a weapon. Von Braun was not a bystander to this. He had joined the Nazi Party and the SS. And records show he visited the camps and was involved in decisions about using prisoners as labor. This is the uncomfortable truth the space age is built on, and it deserves to be said plainly. So how did the man behind Hitler's missile end up as an American hero pointing at the moon? The answer is a secret program called Operation Paperclip. In the chaos at the end of the war, the United States raced to grab German scientists before the Soviets could. More than 1,600 of them were quietly brought to America. And for the most useful ones, their Nazi pasts were downplayed, sanitized, in some cases scrubbed from the record, so they could be given new lives and new titles. Von Braun became a celebrated NASA director, and the rocket that carried America to the moon was, in a very direct way, descended from the rocket that once fell on London. Before we go on, if hidden history like this is what you come here for, take a second and subscribe. This channel digs up the shadows behind the stories everyone thinks they already know, and there is a lot more coming. Okay, back to the moon, because there is a second secret, and this one was hidden not in the past, but in a drawer in the White House. Here is something most people get wrong about Apollo 11. The most dangerous moment was never the landing. It was the leaving. When Armstrong and Aldrin were ready to come home, everything depended on a single engine on the lunar module firing to lift them off the surface. That engine had no backup. There was no second rocket, no rescue mission, no way to reach them. If it failed to ignite, the 2 most famous men on Earth would be stranded on the moon, alive, looking up at their own planet, waiting, slowly, to die. NASA knew this, and so did the White House, which is why 2 days after the launch, a presidential speechwriter named William Safire sat down and wrote something no one was ever supposed to read. It was a memo titled simply, "In Event of Moon Disaster," a speech for President Nixon to deliver if the astronauts could not come home. And its opening line is one of the most haunting sentences ever written. "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace." But it wasn't just a speech. It came with instructions. Before reading it, the president was to telephone each of the soon-to-be widows. And afterward, at the exact moment NASA cut the radio link to the stranded men, A clergyman was to commend their souls to the deepest of the deep, following the same ritual as a burial at sea, and end with the Lord's Prayer. Think about what that means. There was a protocol for abandoning two living human beings on the moon, a moment planned in advance when mission control would deliberately go silent and stop answering them. The speech was never delivered, the engine fired, they came home, and the memo was quietly filed away, unseen by the public for 30 years, until a researcher found it in the National Archives in 1999. So now hold both secrets at once. The rocket that reached the moon was born from a weapon built by the dying, its creator's past buried so a nation could cheer. And the triumph itself was shadowed the entire time by a eulogy sitting in a drawer, waiting for a silence that never came. We remember the flag, the footprint, the words about one small step. That is the version we chose to keep. But underneath it are the parts we chose to bury. A tunnel full of the dead, a speech about the deepest of the deep. The light of that July was absolutely real. So were the shadows standing right behind it. And maybe that is the truest thing about us. We are capable of reaching the moon and of hiding what it cost in the same breath. The greatness and the horror were never separate stories. They were braided together into a single ladder that we climbed all the way to another world. If a triumph with a shadow buried inside it pulls at you, I have another one, and it happened on this exact date 24 years earlier. On July 16, 1945, a different group of brilliant men lit the first atomic bomb in the desert, not entirely certain it wouldn't set the sky on fire. Go watch that one next. It's on screen now. I'll see you there.